Kongs, Kongettes. I believe we are truly beginning a renaissance period for Donkey Kong with the release of Donkey Kong Bonanza, of course. And I don't know about you, but as a lifelong DK fan, ever since the release of this game, I have been obsessing over all things Kong. In celebration, over on my main channel, I just released what is, only by my briefest of estimations, maybe one of the most in-depth Donkey Kong Country 1 retrospectives on this site, with much more planned in the future. And to pair alongside that, I wanted to do something lighter, fun, and a bit unusual for myself over on this channel. You may be asking yourself,
definitive DKC level ranking? What's that supposed to mean?
that's like your opinion, man. And sure, obviously you're right about that. I actually wear glasses though, so I'm gonna keep these on for the rest of the video. However, in the process of completing that video that I began working on as early as May 5th, holy shit, rest in peace my upload schedule, I have been obsessively combing over this game in particular. Not only playing it to 100% completion several times, but also intently researching what the developers were actually after. Obviously, if you want to learn more about that, you can check out the main vid. But for the purposes of this video, in order to make my ranking as definitive as possible, I decided to evaluate these levels through a process of statistical analysis. It's foolproof, I say. Foolproof. Okay, so how am I doing this? I picked 3 distinct categories to evaluate each level, and for the sake of simplicity and fairness, I'm going to be grading them on a 5 banana scale. First up, narrative. Narrative? In my monkey game? What the hell is narrative? Narrative might low-key be the most important category. So one of the coolest aspects of Donkey Kong Country that allowed it to really pop off in the 90s was obviously its very striking art style and atmosphere, right? In addition to that, some of the most memorable levels and level sequences were those that connect to each other and tell a story throughout. Call me a big dumb ape if you want. I think I'm more of a lanky, but to each their own. But growing up, I was never that cognizant of an overarching story, and yet there is something really cool going on in between gathering up those lost nanners. So in terms of narrative, I'm evaluating not only what these levels bring with their individual atmosphere and style, but also how they support this subtle storytelling. Positioning in the world and continuity are definitely big factors, but it's not quite as simple as this is the big epic climax and so this gets a 5. You'll see what I mean as we get into it. Next up is playability. Playability is pretty simple. It's a bit of an all-around gameplay category in which I'm evaluating the level design and gimmicks and their ability to support what we're gonna call a fast and flowing playstyle. This is not just for speedrunners though. This is what DKC is all about. It's that platforming rhythm that makes Donkey Kong Country uniquely addictive. As one of the lead designer Greg Mails' biggest goals when designing this game was to create a fast-paced game, rewarding skilled players with a seamless sense of flow. That doesn't necessarily mean though that some of the slower paced levels will be at an unfair disadvantage. They'll be scored fairly as long as there's a cool purpose for it, and actually, some of the auto-scroller levels actually got some pretty good scores from me. Last is secrets and exploration. How intuitively the secrets are placed and how much fun it actually is to seek them all out is the idea here, along with a twist. 100% completion is actually not as distinctly emphasized in this game as it is in some of the other DKC games, as bonus rooms mainly act as a vehicle for rewarding meticulous players with a lot of extra lives. So while definitely a factor, finding every secret is not super important to the flow of play, and as such, I decided to grade it on a 5-point scale like the others, but weigh it by half in the total score. So with all of that in mind, in scoring these levels for myself, I ended up with a bit of a bell curve skewed towards the more positive end. I love this game, makes sense to me. The problem though, is that it also resulted in some very problematic ties, especially in the middle of the pack. And so I had to devise some tie-breaking rules. Okay, rule number 1 in case of a tie. We continue to prioritize narrative and playability. Basically, if we temporarily ignore secrets and the sum total of the narrative and playability categories outranks another, that level wins. Rule number 2. All right, this one's getting a bit dicey. If that fails, we prioritize the gap between an individual level's narrative and playability score. With conventional game design logic, that just sounds stupid, doesn't it? You mean to tell me that the less balanced level is the better one? I'm asserting that DKC is at its absolute best when it is swinging for the fences. And this is not just my opinion. This is how Greg Males and the team felt. Apathy was their worst nightmare. And so if they could design a level that was less polished and balanced overall, but was still highly memorable and purposeful, that was a more successful level than one that was safer and less impactful. All right, rule number 3. If still undecided after that, then we go back and look at secrets and exploration. Better score wins. And then rule number 4, I'm so sorry, but if all else fails, we have to resort to the final vibe check. Look, I know it's not perfect. I'm not a stats guy. I'm not a math guy. And so if this is inherently flawed in one way or another, as I'm sure it is, I don't know, take it up with my lawyers. I will be taking no further questions or criticisms. Side note, if you want to do your own rating, I left a blank Google Sheets template of the spreadsheet I used to organize this in the description. Anyways, holy mother of yap, can this guy just get on with it already? I hear you. Let's begin the ranking. But really quick before that, because I know it's going to happen, I would really appreciate it if someone left a comment saying video starts at this time code, because for anyone skipping the intro, I think it would be really funny if they had to endure my lanky impression. Thank you for your cooperation. Let's get into it. All right, coming in at number 33, without a doubt, the shittiest level in Donkey Kong Country, it's Snow Barrel Blast. No, it's not. But what if it was? No, absolutely not. It's Manic Mincers. Oh my god, I hate Manic Mincers. In terms of narrative, I will give it a little bit of points for refreshing the cave aesthetic with the shifted color palette and like the vines that you can see coming up on the sides of the platforms and whatnot. But even still, it is kind of just another cave aesthetic with really not much purpose behind it in a game full of caves. So as I was playing this, I'm thinking, why are the mincers here? I guess it makes sense as like a holdover from Krumkrock Industries, but in effect, it's almost a copy and paste of a much more effective earlier level that we will get into a little bit later. I'll give it 2 bananas out of 5 for narrative. In terms of playability, easily the worst Animal Buddy level in the entire game. If Rambi didn't provide an extra hit point, I think it would actually be a debuff, because dodging the mincers here, that's the true challenge. And when you're on Rambi and you have these sliding platforms moving back and forth, Rambi's heaviness, to the credit of the game, he slips around a little bit, and that makes him you feel the weight of the character. So that's cool on its own. On these platforms though, terrible. Absolutely terrible. So not fun at all. I'd say the only enemies here that are of actual minor annoyance as well are the naughties, because they're placed in a manner that is actually challenging. The crushes, though, they just provide no challenge at all. They're kind of just out there in the open, not placed in any threatening manner next to any mincers or anything like that. Additionally, like some of these rotating mincer cycles, I feel like they just make like absolutely no sense. Kind of just complete bullshit, if you ask me. On the topic of Rambi as well, I saw just the other day that getting Rambi to the end of the stage is actually an achievement on Retro Achievements. And like, of course it is, because it is some super silly, tedious bullshit that like nobody is ever going to achieve on their first playthrough. So call it a skill issue. If you like this level, I think you just got some bad taste. Sorry to say. I'm giving it a 1 out of 5 for playability. In terms of secrets, it's almost like the developers knew that Rambi didn't fit well on this stage, because each of the bonuses that could have incentivized players to hold on to him, they also have barrels placed remarkably close by, so he's not really necessary at all. 2 out of 5 for secrets. This level is getting a total rating of a 4, dangerously close to 3 if you catch me on a bad day. Absolute worst level in Donkey Kong Country. Coming in at 32, funnily enough, immediately following Manic Mincers, we've got Misty Mine. As we speed through some of these early levels, you're going to begin to notice a pattern. Most of the levels of Chimp Caverns, to me, feel like an afterthought and serve little to no purpose thematically. I think position matters a lot here. Despite there being many cave and mine-like levels in the rest of the game, the actual mine shaft is pretty uncommon until the very end, and I think that does this level absolutely no favors. There's obviously some potential with the rolling mist effect that comes in and out throughout this level, but I kind of just feel like there's something off about the rest of the aesthetic. Like in the background, you have these dim lanterns which provide some great atmosphere on their own, but the actual lighting levels of the scene seem to indicate that like the entire mineshaft is well lit, and so it kind of clashes in that regard. Overall, feeling a bit similarly to how I did with Manic Mincers. Not much purpose to this level, and the aesthetic itself is not that remarkable on its own. So again, we're giving this a 1 out of 5 for narrative. I also think it's almost perfectly mid on the gameplay side, but the gimmick just feels a bit too uninspired and can often lead to a stilted flow of platforming. To its credit though, it can facilitate some fast rolls, which is satisfying in its own right, and is one of the better use cases for Espresso's strange raised hitbox, but even then, just a little too stilted and bland for me. It's getting a 2 out of 5 for playability. The orientation of the two bonuses is also a little bit strange. You get access to Espresso first, which in and of itself is a fun addition, but immediately following that sequence, there is a very obvious wall that needs to be busted down with a TNT barrel, and that requires you to hop off Espresso as soon as you get him. So I guess in the natural flow of play, it's kind of fine if you end up missing one of these bonuses, but if you're going for everything with 100% completion on the first go, it is a little awkward that you get Espresso and you just have to ditch him immediately. So not as great as it could be. 2 out of 5 for secrets. So with a total score of 4 and the individual scores being nearly identical right off the rip, that does lead us into a problematic tiebreaker in which I have to invoke the vibe check rule, and Manic Mincers to me is just the worst level, bar none. Misty Mine, you get number 32. For number 31, it's Winky's Walkway. Winky's Walkway suffers in almost every category purely for being way too short and undercooked. It's a cool introduction to Monkey Mines and to the walkway aesthetic, serving an endless bottomless pit, but it is over so quickly that it is just super forgettable. 2 out of 5 for narrative. As far as playability, there's not really much point to Winky other than to utterly trivialize all the jumps that are otherwise pretty easy. It's inoffensive and uninspiring. There's also only one secret requiring Winky, and so I guess that's his purpose, but just not much to be excited about. Playability gets a 2 out of 5, and secrets gets a 1 out of 5. The sum total there is a 4.5, and since I don't have much more to say about this level, I want to reiterate that apathy is the designer's self-admitted worst nightmare. They'd rather create a level that provokes a strong response, positive or negative. In Winky's Walkway, failing to strike much of an impression at all is why it falls at the bottom of the pack. Hell, this level's probably over before I've even finished this segment, so if that doesn't say enough, I don't know what does. Number 30, Platform Perils. Platform Perils is the final level in this game, and I truly cannot think of a more video gamey ass level in its entirety. It's not entirely out of the question for levels to feature some floating obstacles that have absolutely no business being there, but yeah, in Platform Perils, there's obviously no narrative or thematic significance to just about anything going on here, outside of a desire to make a very challenging, video gamey final level. And that way, it kind of feels more like a DK-skinned Mario level than anything that feels actually in line with what this game was going for. For that, I'm giving it a 1 out of 5 narratively. And speaking of that challenge, yeah, it's adequately challenging, but it's kind of not fun. It's not particularly advantageous to stick to either Kong here, as the toughest challenges come in the form of these crushes that even DK can't take out on his own. So what you have to do is clear them out with a barrel. It's a bit easier with DK, as Diddy's throwing arc is a bit finicky, and if you try to run into them with Diddy, well, that's often not really possible. The absolute worst part of this level, though, appears right near the end, where the screen crunch renders the next platform pretty much invisible unless you think to actually turn around. And I don't know, man. In my playthroughs, I always found this section to be needlessly frustrating. A 3 for playability might even be a bit generous, but I don't hate the challenge. The last bonus, too, is actually just heinous, man. What a way to cap off an incredible game with a leap of faith. 1 out of 5. With a 3 for playability and a 1 for narrative, as opposed to Winky's Walkway getting 2s across the board, That's a bigger swing for me, and so it's getting the edge. Number 29, Clam City. I kind of view Clam City and its prior level, Orangutan Gang, almost like a pairing of sorts. They are a duo of 2 levels appearing at the end of the third world, Vine Valley, and they resemble the early game, bringing a bit of familiarity back to the level flow right before greatly subverting expectations in the following world. Clam City isn't nearly as effective as Orangutan Gang in this pairing, but it does benefit from the inherent comfort of being a standard water level in terms of atmosphere, at least. I gotta give it no more than a 3 for narrative though, because it's obviously not quite as impactful as some of the others. In fact, even in this pairing, I think it would have been more effective to cap off Vine Valley with Orangutan Gang rather than this level. But the level map was probably finalized before that could have even been put into consideration, so I get it. What Clam City does uniquely offer gameplay-wise is pretty lackluster, if you ask me. The density of the clams is just not that interesting or fun to deal with, and in addition to the other cheeky enemy placements, this is one of the greatest victims of screen crunch of any water level. For some reason though, that last sequence with the clam that shoots out like 10 pearls at the same time was always pretty stressful and memorable to me growing up, so I'll give it some credit there. You'll get a 2 out of 5 for playability. It is also completely unremarkable in terms of secrets or branching paths. I've literally never even gotten On Guard in this level because he's just off on a hidden screen at the very beginning, and honestly doesn't even seem like he would be that useful against the clams. That leaves Clam City with a sum total of a 5.5, leaving it firmly locked in at its position. Number 28, Rope Bridge Rumble. So spoiler, going into this ranking, I thought Gorilla Glacier could potentially come out on top as my highest rated world across the board because, especially narratively, it has some of the highest highs in the entire game. I was surprised then to find out that in reality, it actually came out a lot closer to the middle of the pack, and that is in large part because of this level. This will probably make a bit more sense as we get deeper in, but I'm giving Rope Bridge Rumble a 2 for narrative because it's kind of just stuck on the end of a world with so much interesting continuity, climactic moments, and foreshadowing without anything to offer of its own. It's really done dirty by like all the amazing levels that surround it. The abundance of tires kind of aids the foreshadowing a little bit, but that might be a bit of a stretch, and so it's leaning heavily on being a recoloring of a previous level's aesthetic to even feel like it belongs in Gorilla Glacier at all. I also think this level demonstrates why Winky might be the weakest animal buddy in the entire game. Because animal buddies in this game feel more like a power-up than an outright transformation like they often do in the later DKC games, the levels are often designed to support 2 different states of play, one with an animal buddy and one without. And so, while Winky alone provides enough jump height to easily deal with the obstacles on this stage, there are tires everywhere to ensure it can be completed without. And my god, man, Winky and tires just do not mix well. This is something I've adjusted to over time, but Winky has just objectively poor animations and a wonky hitbox, leading to some very unpredictable platforming results. We don't have to be coy about it, even the developers agree with me. And so, yeah, unfortunate, this otherwise inoffensive level has a few too many small issues dragging it down. I'll give it a 3 for playability. There's 2 secrets here, one to get Winky, and Winky isn't really required for the other one. They're both basically just rehashes of bonus designs from previous levels, so it's a little less satisfactory than mid for me. 2 out of 5 on secrets. That gives us a sum total of 6, also locking it firmly in its place. Number 27, Forest Frenzy. I think Forest Frenzy serves its purpose well enough, but being part of a more rawly gameplay-oriented world, it doesn't really go above and beyond to deliver anything notable narratively, aside from being the second forest level to add some continuity to Vine Valley. That'll give it a 3 for narrative. It is decently fun though, especially for a level that is primarily an autoscroller. It's generally pretty fun to bounce over the heads of enemies in between these twitchy rope segments that feel pretty good to play because holding down the run button provides increased climbing speed. However, I also find that being a truly middle of the pack level is tough for an autoscroller because it can't really provide a truly notable challenge like some of the others do. There's 2 secrets here, one of which is the type that makes you think, Oh my god, seriously, I did not think to look there. And that can be frustrating to replay in search of given its position. I really like the second one though. By now, I think it's safe to say players have grown accustomed to the idea that a conspicuously placed barrel equals a nearby secret. But having to escort this barrel to the end of this critter sequence, it was a fun twist. Okay. Sum total for Forced Frenzy is a 7.5. Number 26, Loopy Lights. Okay, so Loopy Lights is definitely one of the thematically stronger levels in Chimp Caverns to me. Work with the mineshaft aesthetic well as those dim lanterns actually turn on and off with the light switches. It's a nice touch. Unfortunately, it still suffers from the Chimp Caverns debuff, and its gimmick follows the previous Stop and Go station quite closely, leaving it hard to consider particularly notable. That gimmick, though, naturally facilitates some very fun, fast and flowing platforming for all players, though. So I can't fault the devs too much for leaning on it again. If I'm gonna place Stop and Go Station very high on this list, I think I gotta be fair to Loopy Lights. However, where I struggle to give it a perfect mark, though, is the enemy design. The claptraps that jump with you can be particularly annoying, especially that one at the very end of the level in a similar vein to the Crash and Minecart Carnage, and we'll get to that a bit later. It's at least teased by a banana here at the very end, but in my early playthroughs, I swear, man, even with the light on, it just always seemed to blend with the background, so oh my gosh, so many cheap deaths right at the very end here. I will give it a 4 for playability though, in that case. And while this level has some good, well-telegraphed secrets, I currently have it at a 3 because that vulture bit at the end absolutely skill-checked me so many times. I could theoretically see myself bumping the secrets up to a 4 or at least a 3.5, so I feel pretty comfortable with where I have it currently placed. Okay. With a sum total of a 7.5 on the low end, that ties it with the previous level, Forced Frenzy, but it does have a more significant spread between playability and narrative, so it gets the edge. Number 25, Reptile Rumble. Okay, so being the first cave level in the game, it does get some points for introducing the aesthetic, which frankly I think is a bit underappreciated in general given the volume of caves throughout the entire game. I personally like the idea of them a bit more than the mineshaft and walkway levels because even at their most basic at this level, they still have some really cool details and atmospheres such as the foreground stalactites. The sound design in this level is particularly awesome, with these echoey water droplets emphasizing the vastness of the cave. And the backing track even aids the narrative flow of the level, as this hopeful flute melody can often begin playing just as players reach the level exit. Cool transition into the second screen of Congo Jungle as well. 3 out of 5 for narrative. Reptile Rumble is an early, less challenging level that does effectively convey how fun it can be to bounce over the heads of sequential enemies. It's very good, but not quite great given the degree of challenge it can realistically provide this early in the game. There's also a bunch of cool secrets that do a pretty good, non-intrusive job of teaching players that barrels can be used to bust down walls to uncover secrets, and they're all very quick and fun banana rewards that don't really bog down the pace at all. You get a 3 for playability and a 4 for secrets for me. Okay. That puts the sum total at 8, bringing us into a bit of a problematic chunk of levels. As we get further, you'll see why. Next up at 24, quite a similar level, it's Bouncy Bonanza. This level is obviously very similar to Reptile Rumble, and as a result, I ended up giving it a pretty much identical score, but hopefully I can argue the case why I think this level is just a little bit better. Bouncy Bonanza kind of plays with a lighting shift to alter the cave aesthetic to great effect in my opinion. I feel as though Monkey Mines very easily could have ended up a dedicated cave world, but this is actually the only true cave level in it, and I think it serves its purpose well. Tires are frequently used as a gameplay element, but they also do a pretty good job shifting the vibes from a more naturalistic, untouched cave to something that is feeling the effects of the encroaching industrialization on the island. It's also definitely one of the better Winky levels. This level plays with tires and jumping that on its own is inherently satisfying. I gotta take a couple of points off for the inherent flaw that is Winky and tires, but I gotta say, I think this is a 100% better level than Rope Bridge Rumble because it actually fits the vibe of the world it exists in. Interestingly, this level also introduces an upper path mechanic, which is particularly uncommon in this game and almost feels like an answer to the tried and true Sonic level design that this game was meant to address. A couple extra fun secrets on top of that, and you got a level that is a bit more notable in terms of exploration. So with a sum total of 8 at this point, I had to evaluate whether I wanted to elevate Reptile Rumble, which is a cave level that introduces the aesthetic and benefits in that regard, or Bouncy Bonanza, which successfully iterates off of that. And for me, there's just a few too many cool things going on in Bouncy Bonanza to not give it the nod, so we're going with Bouncy Bonanza. 23, Minecart Carnage. Immediately following Winky's walkway, I think this level sets the tempo of Monkey Mines much better. It is super intense, and being the first minecart level benefits from really shifting the tone to something more thrilling as the Kongs step foot out of the familiar jungle. The difficulty obviously matches the tone, and thus this level is highly memorable as one of the game's first true difficulty spikes. For its purpose, I don't mind that there is some bullshit like the crash at the end of the level. I can rationalize that a bit better than the claptrap and loopy lights, honestly. The only thing I feel like this level doesn't really have going for it are the secrets or alternate routes, which wouldn't be so much of a big deal if a later minecart level didn't demonstrate how effectively that could be pulled off. I ended up giving Minecart Carnage a 3 for narrative, a 4 for playability, and a 2 for secrets, which also puts us at a sum total of 8. However, with our first tiebreaker rule, you've got playability at a 4, that's going to put it a little bit ahead above the previous levels. All right, we're getting into some dicey territory. 22, Slip Slide Ride. All right, so my thoughts on Slip Slide Ride varies pretty wildly from category to category, so stick with me here. Starting off with narrative, of course, this is the second level of a 3-level sequence that, bar none, is my favorite in the entire game. After braving one of the most challenging levels in the series, your reward is this breathtaking crystal cave aesthetic that is used one time and never again. And in terms of sheer memorability, I think that was absolutely the right call. It makes this level feel incredibly special. I think the only thing that could have improved it narratively is maybe having a new enemy type that only shows up once and never again additionally, making it one of the only places on DK Island absolutely untouched by the Kremling's influence. It is surrounded by an oppressive blizzard on both sides. Makes sense to me. That being said, I will give it a 4 out of 5 narratively. Playability, though, is where things get a little dicey. For as memorable a moment as it is, I don't often use this term lightly, but design-wise, I think it is one of the most fundamentally flawed in the entire game. Screen crunch here is the big culprit. There are 3 levels on my mind that are like absolutely ridiculous in terms of screen crunch. 2 are water levels, and 1 is Slip Slide Ride, leaving a lot to be desired with this one. DKC 1 notably lacks a lot of the verticality that was perfected in later entries in the series, and you can kind of see that here. While the ideas are fun and interesting, there are a few too many instances of being utterly blindsided by off-screen enemies. I think the camera just fails to adjust to a reasonable position more often than not for this to be considered a well-designed level from a gameplay perspective for me. 2 out of 5 playability. However, I will say this structure is highly beneficial to its secrets and exploration. It is super dense with bonus rooms, most of which play with the sliding rope mechanics very well. And I sure as hell never noticed this on my own, but there's this highly entertaining camouflaged warp barrel at its start. Amazing. We've got a 4 for secrets here, bringing our sum total to, once again, 8. However, there is a pretty big ambitious swing with this level in terms of narrative and playability, with the secrets buffing it up to an 8, and so that's why I gave it the edge over our previous level. That leads us to 21, Tanked Up Trouble. All right, maybe you're asking yourself at this point, how the hell did I place Tanked Up Trouble below Trick Track Trek? And yeah, I'm sorry, it's the Chimp Caverns debuff. In fact, I think if this level straight up replaced Trick Track Trek in Kremkrock Industries, it would be one of my highest rated levels in the game. But maybe I can better argue my case as we get to that one, so stay tuned. As it turns out, this is the first 5 out of 5 I'm giving to any individual category. In this case, playability. I think that's because the fuel gimmick requiring players to frantically grab these fuel canisters in the midst of dodging an onslaught of obstacles just adds so much tension and so much agency that is typically out of the ordinary for an auto-scroller. Like, I think this is one of the most iconic auto-scrolling levels of all time. Following that though, I'm not a huge fan of the secrets in this level. There's just one at the very beginning, which isn't so much of an issue on its own because I think it's okay for an auto-scroller to not have a huge volume of secrets that disrupt the pace. But this one is like a little bit too far to be considered well telegraphed, in my opinion. I guess it is a bit memorable in a silly sense because you do have to dodge gathering any fuel canisters at the very beginning, and then once you reach this part where the platform ascends, it'll drop off and lead you right into the bonus barrel. It feels a little counterintuitive to me, even though it is pretty funny, and so it did make replaying this level in search of that secret a bit rough. Besides that, honestly super fun level to play, and in my opinion, the best that Chimp Caverns has to offer.
Okay.
Tanked Up Trouble is our final level with a sum total of 8, so putting it at the top of this bracket. And the reason I felt comfortable doing that is because while it doesn't win out clearly with rule number 1, it does have such a big swing with that 5 out of 5 playability, basically tanking for its weak narrative, that was enough to place it above the others. All right, we've reached another problematic middle of the pack bracket. Coming in at number 20, it's Millstone Mayhem. Millstone Mayhem is the first of our 2 temple stages in this game, and while they bring their own highly mysterious atmosphere to them, I don't know what they bring to the overall narrative aside from just that, being weirdly mysterious. Like, analyzing this game in depth, from what I could gather, this is a story about the Kongs not only reclaiming their stolen bananas, but also very much fighting back against a foreign invader, something that makes even more sense in the wider context of the series. Then you've got these temples whose only recognizable traits are these millstone naughties and these crockhead statues everywhere. Why? I don't know. Highly mysterious, highly entertaining, but also quite confusing. Both temple levels are great levels to speed through, however, but this one is edged out just slightly by its sibling with respect to that fast and flowing playstyle. Both have great platforming, but I think I just prefer the latter's twist a little bit more. However, if the temple levels have one thing uniquely in common that perhaps supersedes almost everything in this entire game, it's the secrets. This level is absolutely excellent in terms of secrets. I think it's helped by the mysterious nature of it all, but it is uniquely dense with bonus rooms and is easily the best Winky level in the game. Following my issues with Rope Bridge Rumble, Winky is instead primarily used to jump over the giant millstones. Instead of having to jump on a tire and risk having that hitbox fail you, you can jump over these hazards that would normally require the Kongs to tread lightly beneath them where enemies lie in wait. He actually feels like an asset here, and as a secret reward for clever use of a secret tire, this is definitely one of the strongest individual instances of an Animal Buddy level. That's our first 5 out of 5 for secrets, but being closer to the middle of the pack in terms of the other categories, that's what allowed it to slide down in my rating. Number 19, Croctopus Chase. All right, so obviously there's not a ton going on here narratively. I at least think the palette swap here makes a bit more sense than Rope Bridge Rumble, and even the Croctopie got a color swap to match. There's already so much going on in Gorilla Glacier that an Ice Lake, to me, is good enough to support a great gameplay focus level. And on that note, it is without a doubt my favorite water level to play on every subsequent playthrough, because rather than often blindsiding players with unforgiving enemy placement, the challenge is in having to outrun them, bringing a fast and flowing dimension to the water mechanics that is sorely lacking in the rest of the game. And that severely mitigates the pain of screen crunch that is so common in these levels. As it turns out, Donkey Kong Country has some solid swimming mechanics. It's typically just the level design failing to support them. All right, so I'm giving this a 3 for secrets, not because I think there's great exploration here, but because the relative lack of secrets, I think, supports the level design better than if there were a bunch of branching paths. While you could probably argue for some comparisons between this style of play and some of the auto-scroller levels that support secrets fairly well, with a vertically designed level with free movement that is supposed to support this fast-paced play, I think that can detract from its appeal more than it can in the auto-scroller levels, if that makes sense. That puts Croctopus Chase at a sum total of 8.5, once again tying with Millstone Mayhem, but I'm giving it the edge because it has a slightly better playability score. Number 18, this one's gonna get me in trouble probably, Torchlight Trouble. I feel like Torchlight Trouble often gets overlooked because the screen flashing is such an unbelievable oversight. I could then give it a 0 for playability and call it a day, but that is honestly just so boring to me. And when you get a chance to play it on a version where this issue was corrected, like the current version on Nintendo Switch Online, I actually think it has some really great qualities. This might be shocking, but this is low-key one of my favorite levels narratively, purely because of the foreshadowing at play. There's a large stretch of the game where the actual crocodile kremlings outside of the critters are pretty uncommon. Then you get to this level, where there are just clumps and crushes everywhere in between all these burning oil drums. This is incredibly striking and seemingly out of place until you reach the next world where suddenly, this innocuous cave can best be explained as a nearby outpost and refuge from the cold for some of the high-ranking Kremling officers. Yeah, this might be a stretch and me putting a bit too much headcanon into it, but I don't know, man. I think this is pretty cool. I'm giving it a 4 narratively. Following that, I think where I can appreciate it from a playability standpoint is that having all these heavy enemies be an active threat, unlike how they're used in Manic Mincers, it all makes DK's attributes and skill set incredibly valuable in a way that most other levels fail to do in this game. It's nice to have a level where DK feels like the genuinely superior option. 3 bananas for playability here, a consolatory 1 subtracted from the 4 I may have wanted to give it for having that awful flash. Thank you for removing it though. Just a few secrets here, but they're barrel busters, and I love those. So with a sum total of 8.5 yet again, and our scores being almost identical with the previous level Croctopus Chase, I gave Torchlight Trouble the edge just because with the final vibe check, I was hovering so close to giving it a 4 for playability as well. Number 17, Coral Capers. Okay, obviously as the first water level, Coral Capers gets a ton of points for introducing us to one of the best aesthetics and vibes in the game and the series. So aquatic ambience here is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I think I feel comfortable giving it that nod above something like Reptile Rumble, just because water levels as a whole don't play too big a role in the overall narrative, and so that first impression is super important when stacked up against the rest of them. This is also generally a good level to play as far as water levels go. While screen crunch is often a big issue, Coral Capers is easily the most forgiving of the bunch, being in the very beginning. And with On Guard popping up twice, most of the obstacles are a breeze and actually pretty satisfying to deal with. There's also a bunch of variety here in terms of the enemies. You've got piranhas and sharks, and even some clams and croctopus, which are expanded on in other levels. Overall, solid introduction to the mechanics of the water level. There's some very brief branching paths with bonus bananas, animal tokens, and On Guard in this level that are all adequately indicated. Pretty much the gold standard for secrets in water levels. I'm giving this a 3 for secrets, though I could totally see myself giving it a 4 as well. Once again, at a sum total of 8.5 given the nearly identical scores, I am giving it the slight edge over Torchlight Trouble just because I found myself indecisive on whether I wanted to give it a 3 for secrets or a 4. You can see how this becomes quite challenging once you get to the middle of the pack, right? Number 16, Trick Track Trek. Alright, so here we go. Things are getting pretty serious. While I still consider Gorilla Glacier my personal favorite worlds in the game, upon playing this for the retrospective, I was kind of surprised to find out that Kremkroc Industries might actually be the single best world in the entire game across all categories. That is largely because the continuity of the entire world is pretty much unmatched. Starting out with likely the most basic in the world, Trick Track Trek is pretty much a less individually interesting auto-scrolling level than Tanked Up Trouble. It's certainly less interesting from a playability standpoint, but I do want to argue the surrounding levels I think really elevate its narrative status. Following Oil Drum Alley and preceding Elevator Antics, 2 levels we can envision exchanging resources to power the factories. So yeah, while I gave it a 4 for narrative, I am going to give it a 3 for playability, making it one of the weakest levels in Kremkrok Industries. I did, however, give it a 3 for secrets, which is 1 point above Tanked Up Trouble, because even if you fail to reach these bonuses on your first run, I can appreciate that most of them are more clearly visible, making replays less aimless and frustrating. The elevator you can control with your inputs is pretty fun as well, definitely a standout individual bonus room. I generally like the secrets a lot in this level, but I do have one big problem with the final one, because it's kind of a leap of faith with an animal token on it, and this is problematic for me because if that token triggers a bonus stage, just be ready to replay the entire second half of the level as it spits you out just after the checkpoint instead of at the end of the stage where I think it should. Mostly a pet peeve of mine. This once again puts us at a problematic sum total of 8.5 with an identical score, but following the vibe check, I gotta give it the slight edge just because of that amazing Kremkrok continuity. Alright, we are almost out of what is easily the most problematic bracket in this ranking. Number 15, it's Poison Pond. Oh, Poison Pond, yes, I think some people are gonna be at my throat for how high this is rated. Yes, Poison Pond is absolutely miserable to play. I'm willing to admit it is probably the single worst instance of screen crunch in the entire game, even worse than Slip Slide Ride. And that's almost solely because these mincers here often completely blindside you at full speed. I pretty much hate replaying this, but for me, this is such a climactic moment of the story. The payoff, in a sense, for the reveal of the factory in this world is Poison Pond. You got the action followed by the consequences. The water of the entire world, funnily enough, is truly the only place kind of untouched by the Kremlings, and to see their influence creeping into this level with the pollution and their mincers everywhere, it is extremely motivating to then beat their asses in the following factory level. Maybe a bold swing, but this is my first 5 from a narrative perspective. And yeah, in accordance with how I feel about the playability, not very good. That's getting a 2. There is a surprising amount of breach branching paths with the animal tokens here, and if there was a level to include an abundance of animal tokens, it would probably be the one that is incredibly frustrating and punishing. Good way to farm your lives up to prevent a game over though. This is our last sum total of 8.5, but it gets the nod over the others for that big swing with a 5 for narrative. Number 14, Temple Tempest. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this one because my thoughts here are almost the exact same as Millstone Mayhem, except for the fact that I do think it is marginally more fun to speed through with the millstones chasing you and with Espresso as an early secret reward. I ended up giving it a 3 for narrative and a 4 for playability. I do think it is slightly worse than Millstone Mayhem in terms of secrets though, but with the way the scoring weight shakes out, that leaves Temple Tempest slightly ahead of Millstone Mayhem with a sum total of 9. Next up, number 13, we've got Vulture Culture. Okay, so similarly to Forest Frenzy, Vulture Culture doesn't have a ton going on narratively, but it does introduce you to the forest backdrop, and having it be populated almost exclusively by a tribe of Nekis is a nice touch. It makes them feel more like a natural inhabitant of the island, perhaps forming an unlikely alliance with the Kremlings. Maybe they get along because they're often both scavengers in nature. Who knows? We are beginning to get into the territory of some really fun levels to play though, and when I think of DKC's fast and flowing gameplay, this is often one of the first levels that I think of. Between the quick-firing barrel cannons and bouncing off a vulture, off another vulture, and onto a secret, again and again, this level has just such an addictive and fun rhythm to it. Excellent level design. We got a 4 for playability and a 4 for secrets and exploration because there are some great secrets here, either uncovered naturally through bouncing over a sequence of enemies, or with just enough visual cues to get you thinking. Love that first one with the tire. Overall, incredibly solid gameplay focused level. So we got another tiebreaker between Vulture Culture and Temple Tempest with a sum total of 9, but I did give Vulture Culture the edge because while they both promote a very fast and fluid playstyle, Vulture Culture is a bit more challenging, a bit more satisfying, and I like the concentration of the neckies for story purposes. Alright, number 12, this might be another contentious one. It's Elevator Antics. I think this one does get knocked a little unfairly for simply being another cave level, but from my perspective, I think it gets a big buff purely for being in Krumkrok Industries. I think if you look at the map screen for Krumkrok Industries, you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. This is the cave to me that the Kremlings are sourcing a lot of their factory fuel from, and you could argue that it's branching off in 2 different directions, preceded by Trick Track Trek on one side and followed by Minecart Madness on the other after a slight detour in Poison Pond. You see a boring cave level, I see a narrative through line, so I will be dying on this hill. This level is also incredibly tough, as I don't think there is a single level with more enemies in it than this one. This one really tests your skills and demands mastery of the roll attack, both to land those tricky jumps off the coal carts and to clear those beefy clumps. I may have to give it a 3 as opposed to a 4 just because of how ridiculously punishing it can be. This one is pretty inventive with the secrets though, and they're well paced throughout. I think my favorite one is the second with this strange rope tail. Like, you can see it from the bottom, but it doesn't appear to be leading anywhere until you backtrack a little bit, climb up these ropes, and then you can jump off the screen like it's straight up Mario 1 or something. The final one is also pretty funny on its own. In spite of how individually punishing this can be, especially on a first playthrough, I had a great deal of fun exploring it top to bottom. And for that, I'm giving it a 4 for secrets. With our final level with a sum total of 9, you could very easily argue that Vulture Culture should be ahead of this, but I did give it the nod because of that just amazing continuity buff. Moving on, number 11, we've got Minecart Madness. Okay, this one definitely surprised me during my completion run because before that, I always consider myself a Minecart Carnage purist due to the sheer memorability of it all. Minecart Madness isn't granted the same benefit, but it does fit pretty nicely into its world, nestled roughly between Elevator Antics and the following factory level. You can feasibly envision these minecarts actually being used to transport things, which does bring into question the dilapidated nature of the track, but I like to imagine the Kremlings just be wild like that sometimes. I mean, have you seen Rickety Race? They're jumping the tracks in their own park. While I do think jumping from track to track with one minecart is usually a bit more simply fun and satisfying than jumping from cart to cart, this level is able to do something incredibly unique and uncommon for DKC1, and that is introducing some branching paths to the auto-scroller level design. It gives you a little bit more agency than if you were to simply react to the obstacles ahead, as is common in Minecart Carnage. And the secrets here are great! The first one stumped me quite a bit until you realize there's a gap in the banana trail indicating where you have to jump. And the rest are straightforward enough to not really feel like a hindrance in a 100% completion run. This level utilizes its twist in jumping from track to track incredibly well in all aspects of its design, and for that, I ended up giving it a 5 for secrets, which edges it out over Elevator Antics with a sum total of 9.5. Top 10, baby. This is where shit gets real. Number 10, Ropey Rampage. So I think for just about anybody that plays this game, the move from Jungle Hijinks to Ropey Rampage is that first incredible tone-setting moment. It's not all fun and games around this here Congo jungle, and I attribute a large amount of this game's narrative payoff to moments like these, with vague foreshadowing that portray the treachery of the natural landscape. Aside from the monsoon itself being fairly striking on its own, this is the first instance of DKC simultaneously showing off its continuity and surprising players with how quickly their circumstances can change. I think that makes it feel even more natural. 4 for narrative. Ropey Rampage is also fairly challenging for a second level, with long strings of bottomless pits and the army armadillos, which are a big problem for Diddy. That supports the tone, but it also makes it incredibly fun and satisfying to replay. I love running through this level as DK making short work of the armies. Excellent sense of rhythm for such an early level. I think the only real shortcoming here is the secrets though. Neither of them are particularly intuitive, and until I completed this game 100% for the first time, I don't think I discovered either of them. You gotta take a bit of a leap of faith here to land into a barrel and blast into a wall, which I think could have been a bit more clearly indicated with a Kong letter or a stray banana at the bottom of the screen. And then at the end of the level, it is very unnatural to get the camera to reveal this barrel at the bottom of the screen. I think anyone's first instinct, I'm sure, is to see the arrow sign and then just book it for the exit. That's what I often do. It does kind of add to the aha factor of discovering it when you do find it, but you also have to turn around to reposition the camera to actually see it. So it is a bit too unintuitive, I feel, for the second level in the game. Sum total 9.5 here, with the slight edge given that it has a 4 across narrative and playability, beating out Minecart Madness. Alright, yep, this was incredibly difficult, but number 9 is Ice Age Alley. Alright, so Ice Age Alley is the final level in our peak level sequence at the mountain peak, but it's not as striking or distinctly memorable as the 2 prior levels, in my opinion. The twist here is that the blizzard from the first level we'll get to in a bit is slowly dissipating over the course of its duration, which is very cool. It provides some additional continuity, which brings the entire sequence to a very satisfying close. For that, 4. And while it might be the least distinctly memorable of the 3, I actually think it's fair to say it's maybe one of the most reasonably balanced to play. I actually feel slightly different than how I did when I wrote the script for my main video. The slippery nature of the peak makes it incredibly challenging to traverse on foot, but with Espresso, who can be found off the beaten path at the very beginning of the level, or even in its first bonus room, this level becomes pretty breezy and super satisfying to blaze through. Definitely a nice reward for your struggles in the prior levels. The only thing that kind of does frustrate me about it is that second bonus room that requires Espresso and follows a pretty awkward sequence with a claptrap. Not enough to do serious damage to the score, but still a frustration nonetheless. 3 for secrets. Here we have once again an identical score with Ropey Rampage, bringing us at a 9.5 once again, and I did struggle greatly with this ranking, but I think I like the secrets in Ice Age Alley a bit better, and like, come on, that Gorilla Glacier sequence is just amazing. Number 8, oh, we are getting to some of that good shit, man. It's Treetop Town. Treetop Town obviously doesn't have a ton going on narratively, and I'd even compare it to the temple levels for just being slightly mysterious. You might ask yourself, who lives here? And then move on with your life. But to me, it's all about the raw sense of speed and rhythm in Treetop Town. Oh my god, this level got one of the deepest dives in my retrospective for good reason, because its challenge is kind of deceptive. It drops enemies from the top of the screen to catch you off guard, it is a perpetual bottomless pit, and it's the second of 3 dedicated barrel blasting levels. The reason it's deceptive though is because these are all elements of a level that generally cause players to slow down and be careful, but the secret to breezing through this level is to go fast and use all your tools to turn the obstacles into assets and just stay in rhythm, you know? This is the definition, the poster child of that type of gameplay that the designers were striving for. It appears unforgiving and challenging, but with a bit of balls and mastery, a new dimension of satisfaction is unlocked. Definitely one of my favorite levels to replay. This one also gets a couple of decent secrets in that it doesn't detract from the pace of the level, one right at the start and one right in the flow of the barrel blasting. Not remarkable, but certainly not a detriment. With another 9.5 sum total, that 5 in playability trumps all, putting it at the top of this level bracket. Number 7, Barrel Cannon Canyon, baby. Oh, the vibes are absolutely immaculate in the jungle, and this is probably the least narratively interesting junglescape in the game, so it loses some points there, but like, come on, the jungles are so good in DKC1. But for me, once again, it is all about the gameplay here. This level is so much fun, whether you're learning the barrel blasting mechanics for the first time in the breezy tutorial segment, or you're just skipping all the junk and blasting straight to the checkpoint to experience some peak speedy platforming and barrel blasting. A lot of cool little things going on here. The rhythm of the barrels is excellent, lots of jumping on jungle treetops to stay safe and speedy. There are just a couple of cool secrets that show up close to the checkpoint, making them easy to gather on repeat playthroughs. And this freaking roll, man! It's definitely not all free to execute. I think you may need the right speed, timing, and there might be even a little directional influence going on here, but when you hit this roll, it is like the single most satisfying action in the entire game. So much fun. That gets a 5 for playability from me and a 4 for secrets, giving it just a slight edge over Treetop Town. Sum total of 10. Number 6. Orangutan Gang. Oh my god. Orangutan Gang sends off the jungle aesthetic with a bang right before chilling players to the bone in Gorilla Glacier. It is the final send-off to the jungle and starts off with this jaw-dropping orangey purple sunset as you bounce your way primarily over the top of the jungle canopy. The vibes here are really just off the charts, and the sunset is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but that is made more impactful by its positioning in the game. It does kind of make me wish there was maybe just like one more jungle level somewhere in this game. Maybe a bonus like super hard level, because I just want to spend so much more time here. 4 for narrative. Orangutan Gang is super dense though, and that is somehow its biggest strength and downfall for me. It's super fun just sticking to the jungle treetops on a casual playthrough, and I love busting out that steel keg for the first leg of it. And, of course, gracefully gliding over the heads of those dreaded Manky Kongs with espresso. There is one unique aspect of this level making it kind of tricky to score because it is overloaded with bonus rooms. So I don't know, this might be breaking my own rules a little bit, but the way it treats bonuses is so interesting and unique. I previously mentioned that it's typically uncommon to see branching paths in Donkey Kong Country. Well, this level breaks that trend in magnificent fashion because while the initial expectation is to avoid the bottomless pit by sticking to the treetops, there is actually an entire lower path here with an absurd amount of bonus rooms. That makes gathering 1 or 2 in the natural flow of play very fun, but I think my problem is that a couple of them are a bit too obtuse or frustrating, and the rewards kinda suck. Like, if you need to reach the first one, make sure you take out all of these critters beforehand, because if not, you're gonna have to fight the screen crunch to safely get espresso back to the beginning of the level. And then with this third one, discovering the lower path organically already takes a bit of a leap of faith, and then you need to take another one? I don't know, man. It's all a bit much, almost as if it's catering a little bit too much to like the strategy guide playstyle, if that makes sense. So I think it might be a bit of my own personal frustrations clouding my judgment, but in my head, I think a 2 for secrets and a 5 for playability makes sense in this case. I don't know, man. Fight me in the comments, I guess. That gives us another sum total of 10, but because that narrative is just slightly better than Barrel Cannon Canyon, that's gonna give it the edge. Top 5, baby. Starting out, we got Blackout Basement. So Blackout Basement is the second of our 2 factory levels, and I feel like the payoff here, following all the continuity in this entire world, is just incredible. As the final level in Kremkrock Industries, this is the send-off to probably the best world in the game. Definitely the best by my own rankings. And so I kind of feel like if the game were restructured a bit to add a level here and there to each world with maybe a bit more challenging design here, this easily could have been the final level of the game. I talked about this a bit more in my retrospective, but after busting through the first factory level and the following ancillary levels we've already talked about, Blackout Basement feels like the Kremling's last stand. Their second factory is on the verge of shutdown, and every time the lights flash back on, it feels like an even larger wave of critters and clumps is barreling towards you. It's simply ultra satisfying to finally put them in their place in such grand fashion. For that, I'm giving this my second 5 for narrative following Poison Pond. That also makes it incredibly difficult to decide which factory level should be placed over the other because they feel like 2 pretty similar parts of the best level pairing in the entire game. Off vibes, they're pretty much interchangeable to me, as even with this gimmick that significantly raises the stakes and tension, If you just trust your skills, you can absolutely continue to follow an incredible platforming rhythm. It's baked into the cadence of the light flickering. It's tough. I kind of personally like it a little bit more than Oil Drum Alley in that way for building on your understanding of that level and upping the ante, but I think for this list to be a bit more definitive, I have to acknowledge the fact that similar to Torchlight Trouble, it's also kind of problematic. Certainly not as bad as Torchlight Trouble, but it can kind of put you in a bit of a trance, and I think I can see that being a bit of a problem for some players. So I ended up giving it a 4 for playability. It's also a bit lighter on the secrets given the fact it's a more straightforward level, although that ending sequence with the steel keg is a personal favorite. With a 3 for secrets there, that puts the sum total at a 10.5, giving it a clean break above Orangutan Gang. Number 4, the Go tutorial, Jungle Hijinks. I don't know what the consensus is on this, but I know I feel a little weird for ranking a first level so highly, but upon closer examination, I think it makes perfect sense as to why this level in particular is so high up there. It is truly iconic, and there is a significant buff to first introducing so many of those little things that we love about Donkey Kong. DK Island Swing is an amazing track, building gradually from that initial ambience, allowing you to take in all the amazing sights and sounds, and if you take your time in the beginning here, there's a really nice opportunity for it to hit peak vibes just as you reach the level exit. Taking a turn right as the sun begins to set, casting a pretty significant amount of foreshadowing before moving deeper into the unforgiving jungle. I think the reason it ended up so high on my list though are not only all the little details that make it an excellent tutorial level, but also one that is super fun to revisit on repeat playthroughs. It kind of plays itself a little bit, especially with Rambi's inclusion in order to teach players certain enemy properties and what types of secrets to look out for. But there's also a neat touch of being able to go back into DK's treehouse for an extra life and commiserating in the Banana Horde for some added storytelling. There's also some really fun secret touches not related to any bonus rooms, like the steel keg at the beginning or roll jumping over the tops of trees for a bunch of extra lives. That is super satisfying. I guess it shouldn't be that shocking then, because the first level is supposed to leave a really good impression. But yeah, as someone who finds it a little lame to overhype a tutorial, I was kind of shocked to find out just how much adoration I have for it given all the different dimensions of play it offers. Maybe not quite enough to receive a perfect score, I guess, but definitely as close as you can be for an opening level. With a 5 for narrative, a 4 for playability, and a 4 for secrets, that gives us a sum total of 11, starting off our highest level bracket in the game. Next up, number 3, Stop and Go Station, man. What a level. Stop and Go Station is genuinely one of my favorite ways to design a purposefully disruptive level. You know, one that dramatically shifts the tone in a way that is super memorable and grabs your attention. I'm going to expose myself a little bit here and say I very rarely, if ever, indulge in horror games, mostly because I struggle to imagine myself enjoying being super tense and on edge for an entire playthrough of a game. That being said, when a game surprises me with something super gripping, intense, in a one-off fashion, and then releases that tension, that is super moving and memorable to me. Think like Ravenholm in Half-Life 2. That is exactly what Stop and Go Station is to me. These uncanny rock croc enemies that practically jump scare you as they sprint into frame, among the other Kremlings feel really distinct, almost like this is the product or prototype for the ultimate banana-nabbing, monkey-tormenting machine. Go no further, DK, because if you step on some unsuspecting rock, you might have your foot chewed off. Following that distinctly unsettling tone, you have a level that uses its tension to facilitate, to me, what is the purest, most satisfying style of play in this game. It has a really cool twist that augments your playstyle. It directly encourages you to try roll jumping, and all the secrets are well telegraphed enough but aren't super obvious, nor are they frustrating to search for on replays. I also absolutely love the fact that for anyone a bit too chicken to initially proceed, there's a warp in the entryway that places you right before the ending sequence, so if you accidentally stumble upon it, it makes you feel kind of smart for a second before absolutely rocking you with no practice to deal with this unrelenting horde of crocs. This is the type of nonchalant trolling that feels really in line with the spirit of the studio, I think. Freaking amazing level that is honestly made even a bit better by kind of carrying what ended up being one of the weaker worlds across my rating. With a practically identical score to Jungle Hijinks, I ended up giving Stop and Go Station the slight edge almost purely for that hilarious secret at the end, because these two are just so close for me. We're really getting down to it. Number 2 is Oil Drum Alley. So, in order to achieve the amazing payoff in Blackout Basement and Kremkrock Industries as a whole, you obviously need the setup. And Oil Drum Alley does an incredible job at that. I think it was absolutely the right call to immediately lead with this level going into Kremkrock, because it's already been teased like all the way through the entire journey. And then once you get there, it's like, whoa, shit just got real. Super impactful off the rip, and this results in the same kind of effect as Stop and Go Station, but fleshes out this idea into a whole world that feels uniquely out of place and treacherous. You really can't have any of this without Oil Drum Alley, so of course it's got to get a perfect score there. This one is also like such an incredibly bouncy and rhythmic level, as rather than often rolling through enemies, they're arranged in patterns that encourage jumping, which of course is tremendously satisfying in its own way. Then you get Rambi, who has mysteriously been absent since the very first level of this game. And while I do wish his inclusion was just a bit better telegraphed here, it's definitely his best inclusion and one of the best use cases of an animal buddy as an optional power-up, offering some really strong utility against the barrel-tossing Mankeys and even aiding in the discovery of more secrets. However, this level cannot be number 1 for one simple reason. Bonus in a bonus, my friends. I just mentioned how I love the fact that Stop and Go Station has this element of rare trolling you a bit, and like to me, that is tasteful, well-designed trolling. This is just straight up poorly designed trolling, because while the idea of a bonus in another bonus room is a very cool and funny idea, it is implemented in such a uniquely shit fashion that it is reminiscent of some of the worst design in this game. There is at least a hint of it being there, but that is like far and away the only and most intuitive element about it, because matching a single banana for the barrel is such an uncommon thing to do. Like, definitely more of a product of like playground rumors and trying to sell strategy guides than anything that is actually intuitive to discover on your own. And then when you go to actually break the wall in like 2 out of 3 scenarios, it just doesn't work, and you're left with DK celebrating for absolutely no reason. It's super weird. The only way to actually trigger it is to jump into the wall with the barrel, which, I don't know, that's gotta be an oversight, right? Like, what were they thinking? Anyways though, good level. Excellent even. And then finally, what could be none other than number 1, it's Snow Barrel Blast. This level is so interesting, and it's funny to think about how, like, I think DKC fans, especially the hardcore ones, absolutely adore this level, but it can be particularly agonizing for new players, and that evokes almost a primal frustration in people. 10, maybe 15 years ago online, we would all be raging about how much of an unfair difficulty spike this was, but for that very reason, it is like kind of a culturally standout moment for this game, especially in the Donkey Kong fandom. Probably on a bunch of top 10 most difficult level lists of all time, and in a parallel universe, there's probably an AVGN video where he's like, and after all that bullshit, there was an off-screen barrel cannon that would have let me skip the whole thing? What were they thinking? But wouldn't you know, he actually loves this level for a lot of the same reasons that I do. It's the music, man. This might low-key be one of my favorite tracks as an adult, and this is an Evelyn track, not David Wise. Definitely her best in the game. In a similar vein to Oil Drum Alley, it's the jarring nature of placing it at the forefront of Gorilla Glacier immediately after 2 of the chillest levels since the first world of the game. And the way the blizzard steadily grows in intensity before obscuring your entire screen at the end, it's so cruel and tells its own story within the overarching journey. It's elevated by everything before and what follows. The beauty and cruelty of nature's indifference towards us. That's what captivates us and what we fight to existicide and protect. That is Donkey Kong Country to me, man. From a playability standpoint, it's kind of the culmination of what I love most about Stop and Go Station and Treetop Town with the barrel blasting. Insanely treacherous, the vibes are off, and even though it's quite punishing and super easy to slip right off the face of the mountain, everything leading up to the final barrel sequence is placed super intuitively. Even when you fail and reload at the checkpoint, you get to satisfyingly bounce on those neckies one after another before blasting off again. It's no wonder they push this level so hard in the marketing material. Those extra lives you get for hitting every last barrel cannon in perfect sequence though, still eludes me to this day. I will get it one day though. My personal bias might be showing a bit here, but I actually did struggle to initially rate this a bit higher than Oil Drum Alley because of the secrets. It follows a very similar structure to Treetop Town, which isn't exceptional, but kind of works with the structure of the level. And at first, I felt Snow Barrel Blast was a bit weaker in that regard, but no, actually. Every bonus has great tells, even the final one, which for the longest time I thought just didn't. It's unconventional, sure, but this zinger right below a line of bananas, that's it. That's the tell. It's an unconventional clue for an unconventional level. And then you've got a shortcut without any sort of indicator at all, which to me is 100% appropriate. If we look at the competition here, even if we give it a perfectly mid secrets rating, that is enough to gain the edge over everything that surrounds it. So I think that's a lock. Snow Barrel Blast is the peak of Donkey Kong Country, literally and metaphorically. Also, I just need to stick this somewhere because I found it so funny in my research. There's a clip from this British TV show visiting the Rare office back in the day, and Tim Stamper is demoing Snow Barrel Blast like so nonchalantly, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the effect is dynamite." That's Tim Stamper, man. That's my fucking goat doing goat shit. Look at him go. He's so good. And there you have it. I think what I learned from attempting something like this is, holy hell, is it really hard to actually devise a ranking system that doesn't feel both incredibly arbitrary and doesn't result in a ton of tiebreakers. I debated using a 10-point scale, but I think even if I did, some scores would have ended up feeling even more arbitrary than they do right now. So I apologize for any possible inconsistencies in the logic. But that's why I think you should do your own ranking with these considerations in mind. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I left a copy of the spreadsheet I used in the description. It's super simple, super easy. You can use it in your web browser. All you got to do is plug in the values and it'll even average out everything with the 50% weight that I use for secrets. It'll also give you an average ranking for each world as well. So on that note, my ranking of each world altogether is as follows. Last was obviously Chimp Caverns by a landslide. Then we've got Monkey Mines being dragged down by a Winky's Walkway. Then Vine Valley, followed by Gorilla Glacier, which were super close. And then finally, Congo Jungle and Kremkrock Industries, which were neck and neck. This was honestly super fun and challenging because I am severely unpracticed being in front of the camera. So if you enjoyed this sort of thing or you have any advice for me, let me know in the comments. Also, if you ended up here having not seen the big retrospective I put out alongside this, there is a whole nother hour of actually high polished DKC content there waiting for you. Please give it a look if you're interested. If you're eager for more content kind of like this, let me know with a like or subscription. I've got so many ideas and so little time. And as always, thank you so much to my patrons for funding videos like this time and time again, including Julian Messmer, Questing Refuge, and Blacktooth Bob. Wizzy out.